Hi everyone, hope you're well. Chris Cowlin here. Now, before we get into it, I'd just like to inform you about a new website selling quality current and retro Spurs jerseys, okjersey.com. They sell all current and retro Tottenham Hotspur shirts in all sizes. They sell the current fan and player versions, as well as the 80s and 90s retro shirts, including my very favourite, the 1991 FA Cup final shirt. You can order very easily from okjersey.com, and if you use the code Chris, you will receive an 8% discount off your final order. You can also use the QR code on the top left of your screen. And by the way, they also have some training wear here and the 25-26 colour special edition jersey. Hi everyone, hope you're all well. My name is Chris Cowlin and this is another episode of Premier League Predictions. This evening I'll be joined by Gareth McGuinness, of course channel regular. Now we are here to preview and here to look at match week 23. 5 games will take place on Saturday, 4 on Sunday and 1 on Monday. Arsenal are leading the way at the moment, 7 points clear. Manchester City, Aston Villa and Liverpool all in the top 4. Spurs are in 14th and West Ham, Burnley and Wolves all remain in the bottom 3. Now we're live on YouTube, live on X and Facebook. Please do get involved as a little bit of fun. Put your score predictions in the comments section below. Gareth, good evening. How are you?
All good, Chris. Looking forward to another weekend in the Premier League. I'm hoping for a change of fortune again. I said it last week. I was over at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium again, and it was a familiar feeling. I can't believe how it transpired against us last week. Don't think we played well, but I thought there was going to be a winning goal. It was going to be a Spurs goal. I couldn't really believe that West Ham with all they wanted, but again, had a brilliant match day experience. Met up by loads of people. People recognise me as well, so that's always good when you're over there. And they were commenting on the show as well. The many podcasts that we be on, Chris, and of the work that you put on. So look, everything was positive other than the results and a large part of the performance. But no, let's go again. It was a great result on Tuesday night. I was absolutely buzzing with that one against Dortmund, and I'm really hoping now we can take that on the Saturday. And of course, there's some big games on Saturday as well. And look, if you look at Sunday, Arsenal Man United, it's a big game. United look rejuvenated. So all of a sudden now that looks a different fixture for Arsenal.
Yeah, of course, we're going to talk about all of the games in match week 23. Of course, on Saturday, the early kickoff, 12:30, West Ham host Sunderland. There are 3 p.m. kickoffs on Saturday also. Burnley against Tottenham, Fulham against Brighton, Manchester United against Wolves, and Bournemouth take on Liverpool. Sunday's games are Brentford against Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace will take on Chelsea, Newcastle against Aston Villa, and then Arsenal will take on Manchester United. And the Monday night game is Everton against Leeds. Gareth, we're going to get straight into it and we're going to talk about the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday, West Ham United against Sunderland. West Ham are 18th, still in the bottom 3, despite them winning at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last weekend. Sunderland are in 9th. West Ham currently have 17 points. Sunderland have 33. Now, previous meetings, 76, West Ham winning 28, Sunderland 27 and 21 draws. West Ham have lost just 1 of their last 12 Premier League home games against Sunderland, winning 9 and drawing 2, going down 3-0 in May 2011. They've won their last 3 all by the same scoreline, and that is 1-0. How do you see this one going, and what did you make of West Ham last weekend?
Well, the stats that you referenced there, Chris, it's probably very different now. You know, Sunderland are in a much better position than West Ham. If you think about the positions that West Ham have been in, under David Moyes, under Slaven Bilic, you know, a team that were in the top half of the table, you know, won the European Conference League a few seasons ago, and Sunderland run League One. Now all of a sudden, Sunderland are pushing for European spot in the Premier League for next season, and West Ham are in a relegation battle. So it shows you how quickly the fortunes of football clubs can change at the top level. A huge one for West Ham last week. Let's take the Spurs connection out of it. They made it difficult for Spurs. I think they benefited from West Ham probably been feeling that pressure that Spurs had on Saturday. West Ham, the kind of pressure was off them. Being away at Spurs, the fans got on the players' backs. It was very toxic towards the end, and it got even worse, of course, when Callum Wilson scored that winner. So I think West Ham probably had Spurs at the right time. It was a huge one. It was the only. If they had lost that game, you would have really started to think that really is going to be the championship for West Ham. But that one and this home game, yes, Sunderland have been doing well this season, but it is a newly promoted team. So the pressure now goes back on West Ham at home. There will be some West Ham fans expect them to follow that up. So always tricky at 12:30 game as well. But I think Sunderland will relish the challenge of the fans will be on West Ham to try and get this one, and I think Sunderland could benefit from that. So it'll be very interesting to see how the West Ham fans or the West Ham players handle that pressure. It was kind of off them last week being at the Spurs Stadium, as opposed to being at home this week.
I've got to say, whenever I see Bowen, always very impressed with him. Also very impressed with Somerville last weekend against Spurs. I know Spurs have been linked with him, but regardless of that, I thought he was excellent against us. In the reverse fixture earlier on in the season, right at the start of the campaign, Sunderland won this game 3-0. And when you talk about promoted sides, West Ham have lost just one of their last 21 Premier League home games against promoted sides, winning 16 and drawing 4, and are unbeaten in 12 since a 2-1 loss to Brentford back in October 2021. Gareth, what score are you going to go with?
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, Chris.
Okay. I'm going to go 2-1 to Sunderland. Do you think West Ham will stay up, by the way? Just a quick yes or no?
No, but if they were to win this game, they would give themselves a half a chance at least.
Yep. Tottenham Hotspur travel to Turf Moor, 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday afternoon. Of course, last time out in the Premier League, there were boos at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the team and Spurs boss Thomas Frank, having lost 2-1 at home against West Ham. But it was like chalk and cheese. Tuesday evening, a fantastic performance. A lot of players missing in this Thomas Frank side and squad, but Tottenham Hotspur dared. And they did on Tuesday evening, and it was a much, much better performance. The only thing I would say is that we should have scored a lot more goals. Gareth, what have you made of Tottenham in this past week? And Burnley, of course, are sitting in 19th at the moment.
It is a very, very hard one to work out with Tottenham at the moment. That first half that we've seen against Borussia Dortmund was kind of similar to the second half against Aston Villa in the FA Cup, where we kind of just went for it. And you could see the difference in players like Xavi Simons when he's getting the ball in good areas. Spurs are playing 1 and 2 touch football, and they were getting it wide and exposing Borussia Dortmund setup. Pedro Porro in that first half had the freedom of the park. Odegaard was causing all sorts of problems, and this was even before the red card, Chris. So yes, you could say the red card didn't help Borussia Dortmund. Of course, it didn't. But the pattern of how the first half was going it never really changed. With a red card, Spurs dominated that first half, and possibly our best performance, best for 45 minutes in my opinion under Thomas Frank. Definitely as an attacking force when you factor in the opposition as well. Yeah, as you say, we could have been out of sight in that first half. The second half was kind of more reverting to type. Again, we don't know the ins and outs of what was said in the dressing room. Of course, Borussia Dortmund were always going to have some sort of response because they were nowhere near it in the first half, but 11 v 10. I don't think we used the extra man well in the second half, and it was almost as if, when Thomas Frank and the players got into the change room, that kind of excitement of being 2-0 kind of maybe factored on them. We haven't won a game for a while. We haven't won at home since we beat Slavia Prague in the last Champions League game. So maybe that kind of fear factor took in between the coaches and the players, and it was kind of a more dogged display in the second half. We weren't really looking in too much danger. But I think if a Tottenham team and their pump would have went on and probably put 3 or 4, maybe 5 past that Dortmund side because they were there for the taking. Really, apart from that Pedro Porro opportunity at the very end of the game, can't remember too many more opportunities we created in that second half. But look, all that is really irrelevant when you won the game 2-0 and you play as well as you did in the first half. But it just seems at the minute, Chris, that we're not capable of stringing a 90-minute performance together. Thomas Frank's been criticised for his comments referencing the last 8 games. It's been a lot better. And I can kind of understand what he means in terms of if you take little snapshots of each game, there's been little bits. You think about that second half against Villa, the first half against Dortmund, the the Bournemouth game. I think in the first half, when we started the game, we played quite well. We were pushing for a goal towards the end of the game against Bournemouth as well when we conceded. So there has been some good displays and spells, but that isn't enough. And the results haven't been good enough as well. And when you think about some of the other performances, Crystal Palace, I don't think we were that good, even though we won. Brentford away was very, very poor. Sunderland, again, first 45 minutes was okay. Second half was poor. So he will look at any kind of angle to say there has been slight improvement compared to maybe the Arsenal game, the Chelsea game, which was really, really bad. But we had set such a low bar, it was going to be very difficult for us not to show some sort of improvement. But we're still way off, Chris. And that result against West Ham was an absolute hammer blow. Because if you think how bad West Ham have been in recent weeks before that, a lot of my sort of friends who are fans of our clubs says to me, even though you're struggling, I just cannot see any outcome other than Spurs beating West Ham. We were very, very poor. There wasn't really enough in the game. A lot of players underperformed. You think about Xavi Simons' performance against West Ham, the Dortmund performance, it was chalk and cheese. But you could also say that the way we played against Dortmund suited Xavi Simons. It's no coincidence, Chris, that Xavi Simons' best performances have been when Spurs have went on the front foot. So this sit back and negative and stiff passages of play does not suit a player like Xavi Simons. And I'm not trying to compare him to Christian Eriksen, but I think he has that player on the team at the moment that if you get Xavi Simons on the ball and get him playing and getting him on the right areas and you play the way he needs the team to play, I think you see a much better Spurs. He has that player that can see things that some of the other players can't at the moment. So I've been encouraged with some of his recent performances, and I think, in time he will be a real success for us. And I did doubt him initially whether he would suit to this English style of play, the Premier League. But I do think there's been serious improvements there, and he's building more in confidence. And Chris, one other thing on Xavi Simons, I love the reaction he has when he gives the ball away. He always tries to go and win it back, and he's quite aggressive as well. We've seen that against Liverpool. He overstepped it with a red card, but I think that'll help him as well, that he's not afraid to put his foot on.
Gareth, you've been extremely critical. I think it's very fair to say you've been extremely critical of Thomas Frank this season, particularly in recent games, performances, results, etc. Is there a part of you, and I feel like I've had this conversation a lot since Tuesday night, is there a part of you that has changed your mind or has made you wonder whether Spurs can play more like we did against Dortmund than we have done in previous games where we haven't picked up results? I get your point, and I get Thomas Frank's point where you're picking out positives in games. He mentions the last 7-8 matches, and there are moments in these games. But as you also rightly said, we're not doing it collectively over 90 minutes, which I think is a big issue this season, particularly when we're almost at the end of January. But is there a part of you that thinks or has made you wonder since Tuesday night, this can actually work under Thomas Frank? Give him time.
I think it would need to be over a more consistent run of games. Like you say, he's pointed out some positives there, but it's not enough for me to change my mind at this stage. If we go and beat Burnley and it's convincing, and we go and beat Frankfurt next week, albeit a Frankfurt team that have really nothing to play for, but that's a dangerous. Everyone thinks, that's a good thing, but Frankfurt, the pressure's off. They might play, with more freedom, try and give their fans something to kickstart their season, because there's been a new manager change there as well. So that's not taken for granted. We know how difficult it was there last season when we won 1-0. It was a difficult game to get into that semi-final. So, but there is an opportunity across these 2 games for Thomas Frank to buy himself more time. And look, it's starting to get to the point now, Chris, whereas I have said that I think we should make a change and get an interim in. But if it gets to the stage where we pick up the odd result here and there, and there is slight performances for 30 minutes here and 40 minutes there, I think the club will probably roll with it until the summer, because the longer it goes on now, would there be any value in bringing in an interim for 2.5 months? If you think about it, there'll be an international break now in March. You'll come back, it's April. who realistically is going to take on that job unless it's somebody that's maybe in the club already, unless it is a Johnny Heitengate, they see it through. I don't really see now a Robbie Keane or a Jurgen Klinsmann or a Harry Redknapp coming in for that short of a spell. So I think if Thomas Frank gets a few results over the next few games, he'll probably get through to the end of the season. And then there'll be re-evaluation because, look, there is some big names that's going to become available after the World Cup. One being a very much a fan favourite in Mauricio Pochettino. So he's going to have to do a lot more than, reference 30-minute spells or 45-minute spells in a run of games. They convince the board and the fans that he should be the manager next season. But that result against Dortmund does give him a little bit of breathing space. But if we go to Burnley and get beaten, people are going to forget about the Borussia Dortmund result because Burnley, again, are one of the weaker teams in the league. And the worrying record that's setting on at Spurs is Bournemouth couldn't win for a while, beat Spurs. West Ham couldn't win for a while, beat Spurs. Burnley are actually on the longest Premier League run without a win. And if that was to happen 3 times in the 1 month, it wouldn't say a lot about this Tottenham side under Thomas Frank that they're actually a bit of a cure for teams that are going through bad spells. So it's a huge game for the manager. Again, we keep saying it every week, but Saturday is another big game because anything less than a 1 will not be tolerated by the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Gareth, of course, on the opening weekend of the Premier League campaign, 25-26, Spurs beat Burnley 3-0. Of course, Richarlison scoring a couple of great goals. Where do you think the clubs are now compared to when we played them the first time at the opening weekend?
Well, from a Burnley perspective, I think when you looked at all the squads at the start of the season, I always thought that they were probably the weakest of all 20. I think because Wolves have been doing so poorly until recently, that's probably the only reason Burnley aren't bottom of the league. I think there's every chance now, the way Wolves have started getting some momentum together, that Burnley will probably end up finishing in last position. And that's probably where they should be on merit. So I don't think there's too many surprises with Burnley. I think when Spurs beat Burnley, let's go back. Even we were at the Super Cup game, Chris, in Udine, and we've seen a lot of positives in that display, despite losing on penalties. Then the Burnley result was very positive. Then they go and beat Man City, and you think, oh my God, this could be a real success. But there hasn't been too many moments since those opening games they shout about this season. Borussia Dortmund probably is the one, if you think about it, on Tuesday night, in between Man City and Borussia Dortmund. I can't think of any other statement victories out there. So, yes, there were some ones at Everton and West Ham, but at the time, West Ham were in a mess. I think Graham Potter was sacked, and the Everton result was kind of a set-piece victory, even though it was a 3-0 one. But yeah, it's been a very tough watch for fans this year, Chris. You've been to every game. There's been more boos than cheers. There's not a lot of positivity. I've obviously been going to the games for a number of years now, and I've been to a lot of games last season, and I've been to a lot of games this season. And I think even this season, it's more toxic than it was last season, because I think at times last year under Ryan Postecoglou, even though we were losing games, the team was creating chances, they were scoring goals, and the games had a bit more of an entertainment value. But at the end of the day, it is all about results, and I get that. But I think when you're not getting results, you need to have some sort of excitement in the games. And for a lot of the games, it's been very, very difficult to watch. And West Ham was another one of those on Saturday. And I have to say, I always sit in the South Stand, Chris, when I go to the games, and I've never seen so much animosity and anger in them stands. It probably didn't help the way West Ham scored at the end, but even at 1-1, I think there was going to be boos at the end anyway, because a lot of people were leaving early and a lot of people were booing the team throughout the game. So I think that probably added another layer to it. But 1-1, I think there would have been as much boos as there was at the end at full time anyway.
Surely you'd take another 17th place finish for another European trophy.
Well, I mean, if we're all in Budapest again, I definitely. I would take 17th again if it got us to Budapest, if that was the trade-off. But look, this is a much more difficult competition. We've got a great opportunity. I know we're speaking about the Burnley game, but that is a great opportunity next week. They go and get a real upper hand in this Champions League. Look, we've seen it last season with Liverpool. It doesn't always guarantee a nice draw. Liverpool topped it last year and then drew PSG, who knocked them out and went on to win the competition. So cup football you just don't know sometimes, but when you're still in there, and if you give yourself the best possible chance, in all likelihood, Liverpool were a bit unlucky last year to draw PSG, but in all likelihood, we would have a decent last 16 draw if we beat Frankfurt and qualify for the last 16 automatically. We'll play one of the playoff teams. We'll also have the second leg at home. And if we can somehow get a favour from either Liverpool or Real Madrid, we could actually finish in the top 4 teams, which would mean we would be also at home in the quarterfinal of the Champions League in the second leg. So I think all those things can really help you out in these cup runs. But we need to get back to winning ways in the league too, Chris, because it's unlikely we're going to win the Champions League. I think that's very unlikely we're going to win that. Even the most deluded Spurs fan out there would probably admit that. So we need to make sure we're going to be back in Europe next year, Chris, because I know you were devastated in Ange's first season, although the team was doing well, that you miss out on all the European trips. And at the moment, we look like we're going to miss out for next year in Europe. So, the fans love the European trips. You always speak very highly of them and going to different places. So we need to make sure we're in Europe as well next season.
Absolutely, and it should always be an expectation at Spurs, particularly with how everyone goes on about the stadium, the training facilities, etc. And the players that you want coming through the door, particularly in the summer window, you want to be playing in the top European competitions. Absolutely. Let's go through some of the match facts and stats here. Burnley have lost 6 of their last 7 Premier League games against Spurs, including each of their last 4 in a row since a 1-0 home win back in Feb 2022. Tottenham averaged 2.2 goals per game in the Premier League against Burnley, 41 goals in 19 games, only averaging more against Hull City among sides that they have faced 10 plus times, which is 2.3. Tottenham are unbeaten in their last 13 Premier League away games against promoted sides, winning 11, drawing 2, since a 3-1 defeat at Leeds United at Elland Road in May 2021. And Tottenham have lost 4 of their last 8 Premier League games against sides in the relegation zone. This is a problem, Gareth. Winning 3, drawing 1, including a 2-1 loss against West Ham last time out, as we've just spoken about. Spurs haven't lost consecutive league games, with both coming against sides in the bottom 3 since March 1997, and that was against West Ham and Nottingham Forest. On that subject, what sort of game are you expecting at Turf Moor on Saturday? And talk to me about Scott Parker, the type of job that he's done there. How impressed have you been with him? Because, of course, got them promoted. But, of course, coming to the Premier League, it's very, very tough. And also, Gareth, your football knowledge is exceptional. Talk to me about the key players for this Burnley side on Saturday.
Well, on the game itself, I think it's going to be... I don't expect it to be as open as it kind of was in that first half against Dortmund. I think Burnley will sacrifice possession. They're going to be trying to make it very difficult to beat. Spurs will probably have to try and... Thomas Frank away from home's been kind of letting the opposition kind of come on to Tottenham and maybe trying to play counter-attack or set pieces. But I think this will be different. I think we'll probably have to almost treat this like a home game where we'll dominate possession. Burnley will play for counter-attacks. They'll play for set pieces themselves. I think it'll be scrappy, Chris. Both teams in pretty poor form in the league. Scott Parker will know that if they can keep a clean sheet, Spurs haven't been keeping clean sheets recently in the Premier League. You think about that West Ham game, even the Villa game in the FA Cup, conceding really soft goals. Sunderland, you could kind of feel that we didn't kill them off. And I think he'll realise as long as Spurs are even only 1 goal up, that Burnley can definitely get something out of this game. So they'll want to try and keep it as tight as possible. Interestingly, one of their key players, he wasn't really getting a look in at the start of the season for Burnley. He did score at Anfield last week. It's a name that some of the viewers will know is Marcus Edwards. And I think he's been a little bit unlucky with his time at Burnley, that I think because they were playing very defensive, dogged football, he's more of a luxury player. But he has started to get more games recently off the bench in recent weeks, and I think he's earned himself a start, and he'll want to score against Spurs again, because if you remember, he did score against Spurs for Sporting Lisbon in the Champions League. So
Yeah.
he will be up for this game. And I think he will be the player that Spurs are going to be having to keep quiet. They've also, one of their key players and captain is Josh Cullen. He's actually recently picked up an ACL injury. So that's a massive blow for Burnley. He plays as their number 6. Also a massive blow for my country, Ireland, in terms of getting to the World Cup, the playoffs in March. He will not be part of that. So you could say that's a good thing for Spurs, that he is kind of their main man in the middle. But I do expect it to be a scrappy game, Chris. And I kind of feel like one goal either way will be in it, or a draw.
Well, before we do get the score predictions, no team has scored more headed goals, 9, more goals from corners, 11, or more goals via defenders, 7, than Tottenham in the Premier League this season. Interesting stats there. Tottenham have had just 235 shots in the Premier League this season, with only 5 teams registering fewer. Tottenham's average of 10.7 shots per game, and that isn't on target, by the way, is the lowest on record in a single campaign. And this is since the 97-98 campaign. And this is why a lot of Spurs fans have been saying that watching Spurs this season is like watching Tottenham in the 90s, because all of these stats do add up. And also, what we've said a lot of the time as well, Gareth, particularly this season, is there's a real emphasis on Spurs attacking down the right-hand side. We've seen Mohamed Kudus do it and Pedro Porro, because Tottenham's Pedro Porro has played more passes into the box, 180, and delivered more open play crosses, 113, than any other player in the Premier League this season, with the Spaniard also creating the most chances among defenders, and that is 32. A big key player for Tottenham, actually, Pedro Porro. Talk to me about your predicted starting 11, because of course we had a lot of players missing on Tuesday. We've got a lot of injuries right now. Players, of course, weren't registered for the Champions League squad. Of course, Pape Matar Sarr has come back. This game is probably a little bit early for him. Predicted starting 11, who do you want to see?
Well, Vicario will be in goal. I thought Pedro Porro was very good in the first half against Borussia Dortmund. So I think he'll play in there. Just what you said about there is a heavy emphasis on his crosses. And I think with Dominic Solanke being back, I mean, we've really missed him, Chris. You know, his first touch, his hold-up play, bringing our players into the game, that made a huge difference on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Well, you know, he played 70 minutes, which is really positive. Is he going to be recovered to play another game? I think we're probably going to have to play him anyway, because I think we're stuck. But I'll come to that in a bit when we get to the attack. But Pedro Porro, Romero, and Van de Ven will come back. Obviously, he was suspended against Borussia Dortmund. He'll come back in. Interesting one at left back, because I mean, Jed Spence in that first half was like everything you want from a winger, and we just haven't had that really. Apart from maybe earlier on in the season with Kudus, but you haven't really had that down the left side. And it was like watching, it was almost as if we signed a player and it was his first game, because it was just incredible in that first half. So, you know, will he go with Doggett left back? I think we have to. I think we go with Doggett left back. Midfield, Conor Gallagher will come back in. Of course, he was unregistered against Borussia Dortmund. Huge loss with Lucas Bergvall, Chris, and that kind of counteracts the signing of Gallagher now, because we signed Conor Gallagher because we were short, and now we've lost an hour long-term injury to a player. Rumours he's out for up to 3 months. So I would imagine that Archie Gray plays alongside Conor Gallagher, and it'll be Xavi Simons in front. And then I would go Odegaard on the right, Spence on the left, and Solanke up front. And people might laugh at the Spence. I mean, I laughed at it, to be honest, when I seen the starting and Spence was playing out the left side. But I don't think you can drop him after that. I think you have to give him another chance and see how he does. Because let's be honest, although Tell's been doing a bit better, you know, there's no one really nailed down that left side. So why not give it to a player that's, you know, it was arguably the best 45-minute display from a left-sided player this season. So he has to play for me. And Solanke through the middle, who I thought was outstanding against Borussia Dortmund. But Chris, just on that, you know, you think about this January window, and you think about, you know, we've lost Bentancur, Kudus, and Bergvall now to long-term injuries. We need to go onto the market again. I know it could lead to problems down the line, but we can't rely on 11 players playing Champions League and Premier League. If we're going to do anything in the Champions League, and if we're going to get ourselves back into Europe, whether that be Conference League, Europa League, or even maybe Champions League, the results of the English teams now, it's nearly guaranteed that there's going to be 5 English teams in the Champions League next year, which means there'll be 2 Europa League teams and 1 Conference League. So there's going to be 8 English teams again. So the top 8 will be enough for Europe. So we need to go out now in the last week of the window. I know we signed Sousa tonight, but he has one more for the future. We need to go out and bring in some players, especially in that midfield area for me. I know Polina will be back shortly, but we're really short. And yes, we've been a little bit unfortunate with injuries, but if we're going to save the season, we need personnel. We need players that come in and make a difference between now and May. So I really hope the club knuckle down now in the last sort of 9-10 days of the window and get some bodies in that can really make a difference.
Gareth, 67% of Tottenham's Premier League points this season have come during away games. That's 18 out of 27. Only league leaders Arsenal 21 have earned more points on the road than Spurs 18. Why is that? Why do Spurs seem to perform away and in cup competitions rather than Premier League home games?
Well, I'll give you the Premier League side of it first. I think the players really struggle to deal with the pressure at home. I think that record that's going on quite a long time now, it encourages away teams to come to Spurs and think, well, you know what's going to happen here. If Spurs don't start on the front foot and it start making mistakes, giving the ball away, playing backwards, going back to Vicario from the halfway line, what's going to happen? Ooh, and then that transfers to the players. They get nervous. The manager's getting absolutely hammered. And then all of a sudden, these away teams are smelling blood. And I think West Ham probably couldn't believe their luck. That's how toxic it was on Saturday. Thomas Franks had a pop at the fans, but I think he's learning by the weeks that it's funny he keeps praising the fans now. In the last couple of press conferences saying how great they are, because I think he knows he has to try and keep them on side. Not so much that he wants to have a great relationship with the fans, but he knows that if the players play in a more positive atmosphere, more chance of getting more results. And obviously, the better the results are, the more time he gets. So he will know that. I don't dislike him. I think he is a very smart man. He's a very likable man. But I just think at the minute, and it's not the right fit long term. But look, I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope Dortmund one can kickstart a bit of a run. But if we don't bring in any players, Chris, in the next week of the window, I don't think it will matter who the manager is, because you can't rely on 11, 12, 13 fit players between now and April, and that is realistic. So he needs help in the transfer window. We'll see how much the club are behind him. We've heard all the positive PR from Vinay Vikatesham. He's going to have to back this manager now, or he will have to sack him, because there's no manager could survive with that amount of injuries now.
Gareth, what's your score prediction? I'm going to go for a 2-0 Spurs win. I just think that, after that performance on Tuesday, of course, we are expecting a lot more. Like you said, we need to get back to winning ways. I feel like this is a crucial game for Tottenham, and I really am hoping that Tottenham deliver and bring home the 3 points from Burnley on Saturday, because we need to start climbing up that Premier League table. And like you've said about the European spots, I think that always we should be expecting to be finishing in a European spot. Yes, we finished 17th last year, but we should be in a much, much higher position. I just hope that we have an all-round performance on Saturday and, like I said, deliver. What do you reckon?
I'm going to go 1-0 Spurs, Chris, and I hope by the end of this transfer window we've got some more players to talk about, because this predicted 11 at the minute picks itself. There's no one really else we can put into the team.
Yeah. Right, thank you for that. Right, let's move on. Fulham against Brighton, another 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Fulham are currently 11th. Brighton are 12th. This is literally a mid-table clash. Now, Fulham, the last time out, lost 1-0 away to Leeds. Brighton, they drew 1-1 against Bournemouth. Previous meetings, played 23. Fulham have won 9. Brighton 8, 6 draws. Fulham are unbeaten in all 5 of their Premier League home games against Brighton, winning 4 and drawing 1, having lost 3 in a row against them in the Championship before that. What have you made of both sides recently, Gareth?
Well, I was really looking forward to that Brighton and Bournemouth game on the Monday Night Football. I was actually a really good watch. Probably not as many goals as we thought there would be, but both teams played on the front foot. It was a really good watch. Brighton deserved their equaliser at the end. It seems very funny this season, Chris. It seems to be the season of acrobatic goals. It seems like I've seen so many acrobatic finishes this season. You never really see, if you've seen one in a season, but I think Paulinho scored 2, maybe even 3. There was an acrobatic finish from a Brighton player on Monday night as well. So look, I think Brighton are a very exciting team. I think Fulham are on a really good run of form as well. Apart from that, Leeds, they conceded very little at Leeds, but they were on a great run before that. So I think it'll be very attacking. Both teams are going or will go for it, and I think it could be a very entertaining game with loads of goals in it. Both teams will have their eye on one of those European spots. It's just where they can find that consistency to go and do it. I think these two teams on their day can give anyone a game, but they can't do it 2, 3, 4 weeks in the bounce in terms of winning. Fulham had a run of unbeaten in 5 games, but I think 3 of them were draws. So you have to, and we've seen it, Chris, already. If you can win 3 or 4 games in a row in this league, you are going to shoot up the league table quite a bit, because teams are really struggling to string back-to-back wins together.
I'm going to go for a 2-1 home win. What are you going to go for?
2-2, Chris.
Okay. Right, next up, Manchester City take on Wolves, who, of course, have only won once in the Premier League this campaign. Manchester City have embarrassingly, and that was their players saying that as well, they lost away at Bodo Glimt. Winning at Bodo Glimt in Norway is not for everyone, is it?
No, sure, that's it. If you had played the teams at Spurs, that apparently you would have won the Europa League. But sure, Man City tried that, and they were well beaten in the end. So, as you say, look, I think the reception was that hostile, and the fans were that the players refunded the fans, and that is something you don't see every day in football. I'm interested this week, Chris, that Erling Haaland says he's absolutely knackered, and there's too many games. I think he's only scored 1 goal in his last 8 games, and I think it was a penalty. So not good signs for Man City. Yes, they've got a lot of injuries, and I think it shows you, Chris, that even Pep Guardiola, Man City's injuries are building up, and even Man City are struggling with their squad. So yes, we've been critical of Thomas Frank, but like I said, I think if you give these 11 or 12 fit players at Spurs up to Pep at the moment, he would probably struggle. And look, the difference with Man City and Spurs at the moment is Man City have went out and signed 2 players that walk into their team. Mark Gahey will probably play this weekend and make his debut, and Semenyo's already made an impact in terms of scoring goals. That is the kind of players that Spurs need to go out and sign now, between now and Monday the 2nd of February. Bring players in that get into your starting 11. Even when everyone's fit, I think Gahey and Semenyo could be in the team. They're not just signing players for bodies, they're signing real quality. So Man City desperately need to start winning games again, or their season's going to be virtually over in terms of League and Champions League. They're now in a fight for a top 8 automatic spot in the Champions League. That's not guaranteed, even if they won their last game. And of course, they're falling further and further behind Arsenal, and they think that Arsenal have drawn back-to-back games in the Premier League and have extended their gap over Man City. Tells you a lot about Man City's problems at the moment.
Yeah, like you said, Manchester City sitting in second, played 22, won 13, drawn 4, lost 5, 43 points. They're 7 points behind Arsenal right now. Wolves, they have played 22, won only 1, drawn 5, lost 16, but they are unbeaten in their last 4 in the Premier League. Surely this is going to be a routine win for Manchester City, though, isn't it, at the Etihad?
Well, this is it. How can you believe if we had been doing this? If I had said to you, Chris, on one of those Christmas shows that we did, that Wolves are going to arrive in better form than Man City in this game, you would have laughed. This is you're finished on this podcast. You'll have to get drug tested. But it shows you how quickly things in football can change. And Wolves will go to Man City with the pressure off. We've seen what they've done at Arsenal and Liverpool and Spurs this season, where they've made it very difficult. And these games that Wolves have it's been very competitive on. So yes, you could argue that Man City, it's a great game for them to get back on track, but this is a rejuvenated Wolves. And I did say last week, Chris, that I thought they would beat Newcastle. In the end, they got a draw. So they're not an easy team to play against at the moment.
Well, you might be surprised with my score prediction. It was 4-0 at Molineux back on the 16th of August, and I think it's going to be 4-0 again at the Etihad to Manchester City.
I'm going to go for a 3-1 Man City 1.
Okay. They need to keep winning. They need to keep winning, Gareth. Keep up that pressure, as well as Aston Villa. Now, the 5:30 p.m. kickoff on Saturday is Bournemouth against Liverpool. Bournemouth are down in 15th. Liverpool are up to 4th. Now, points-wise, Bournemouth go into this game with 27 points. Liverpool have 36. Now, last time out, Bournemouth went to Brighton and got a 1-1 draw. And last time out, Liverpool drew at Anfield against Burnley, 1-1. Previous meetings, 21 wins, Bournemouth 2, Liverpool 18, and 1 draw. What do you reckon on this one?
Well, funny enough, both of these teams love a draw. I think Liverpool are unbeaten 13 games, but a lot of them have been draws. Yes, there's been some ones in there, but they've been drawn kind of as many as they've been winning in that run. Bournemouth, I think Areola pointed out after the Brighton game that it's hard to believe they've only won one game in this long run that they've been on. Obviously, it was Spurs, but they've had so many draws, and he was saying a lot of these games we could have won. So I think, based on form, based on the stats, this has got a draw written over it.
Yeah, okay. I'll go along with that. 2-2.
I agree. 2-2.
That was nice and easy. That's the quickest one we've ever done. Right, Brentford take on Nottingham Forest, 2 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. Brentford are up to 7th. Nottingham Forest are 17th. First of all, Gareth, let me ask you how impressed you have been with Keith Andrews at Brentford and the job that he has done there.
I think it's absolutely incredible what he's done there. I think Keith Andrews and the Sunderland manager, the Breeze, I think his name is. I think those two are two of the contenders for manager of the season. Because if you look at the rest of the table, yes, you could argue if Arsenal go on to win it, Arteta should get it, but the rest of the table, these two are probably the ones that have been the most surprising. In terms of their league position, you would expect both these teams to be in a relegation battle. So I think you have to give both teams massive credit we were speaking about Sunderland earlier on. I think you have to give both them teams a lot of credit. Nottingham Forest would have been coming into this game, if at the start of the season thinking, if we can get ourselves in a good position, then the second half of the season push on for a European spot. But it's the other way around. Brentford are the team that are looking for a European spot, and Nottingham Forest are the team that are in the relegation battle. So I think you have to give massive credit to Keith Andrews. It was a difficult job to take on. Yes, you can say Brentford are a really well-run football club, but they lose the amount of players and the manager they did in the summer, and they've actually got better. I think is a massive tick for Keith Andrews, and definitely for me, a contender for manager of the season. I think for Brentford now, you have to think, well, we're safe, so why not let's have a crack? There's going to be 8 English European spots up for grabs. Why can Brentford not be part of those 8 teams? They're more consistent than some of the others, but when it gets down to the business end of the season, can you hold yourself together? We've seen Nottingham Forest last season. They were in 3rd position, and in the end, slipped out of the top 5 and only qualified for the Europa League, which was brilliant. But that's the thing. If Brentford are sitting 7th, 8th with 4 or 5 games to go, will they be able to hold themselves together against some of the other teams that'll be trying to snatch that spot off them? So fascinating season for Brentford, but they'll really want to try and make count of this now. And look, Nottingham Forest, great result against Arsenal last week. They hold them to a draw, but this is a different kind of game, and they're going to be expected to try and win this game because they're not completely safe yet. They are still vulnerable of the drop.
Yeah, like you mentioned last time out, a 0-0 draw at home against Arsenal, and before that, that massive win at the London Stadium 2-1 against West Ham, a huge win for them. Now, earlier on in the season, opening weekend, Forest beat Brentford 3-1 at the City Ground. Brentford lost this exact fixture 2-0 last season, but have never lost consecutive home league matches against Nottingham Forest. I'm going to go with a 1-0 Brentford win. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go 2-1 Brentford.
Okay. Right, next up, Oliver Glasner, still in charge at Selhurst Park. Crystal Palace take on Chelsea, 2 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. Crystal Palace are down to 13th. Chelsea are 6th at the moment. Crystal Palace have 28 points. Chelsea have 34. Now, earlier on this season, on the opening weekend, this game finished 0-0 at Stamford Bridge. Crystal Palace are winless in their last 16 Premier League games against Chelsea, drawing the last 3 after losing 13 in a row. What have you made of the comments from Oliver Glasner, Gareth, this past week or so? Because some people expected him to be sacked.
I think it's a very sad ending for Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace, because he's tarnishing what, was an unbelievable achievement, winning the FA Cup at Crystal Palace, getting them into Europe. But I'm actually sorry, because I think Palace are a great club, but I did sort of say this on one of the shows over Christmas, that I thought it was going to be very difficult.
It's frustrating for him, though, isn't it?
It is, and I'll speak about that in a second, Chris. But from a club point of view, I think we says that it could be a very difficult second half of the season for Crystal Palace. One, because the manager hadn't come out of his future. He was ranting and raving about Palace not investing in the squad, and no serious club sells their best player, and then now has their second best player out of contract. He's now since moved to Man City, so it was never going to end well. Because Oliver Glasner wanted Palace to kick on, but Chris, being realistic, where are Crystal Palace in the food chain in the Premier League? They're not a team that are going to be competing at the top of the table. They haven't got the resources. They haven't got the revenue. So Glasner can talk about, having top players there, but it's just not going to happen. Steve Parish, in my opinion, is probably the closest to Daniel Levy in terms of how he runs his football club. I think he runs a very tight ship. Palace are really in good financial position. They're an established Premier League team. They were down in the Championship for a number of years. So I think Crystal Palace are going to continue to work that model. Yes, can they push on those European spots, but they were never going to kick on and let's go and try and get into the Champions League. And that's what Oliver Glasner sees himself. That's where he sees himself. Don't forget, this is a manager that won the Europa League with Frankfurt in 2022. So, he's made his name now. It's clear that he feels that he's ready to move up the ladder. Maybe he wanted to do that with Palace, but it was never going to happen. He's not going to have no shortage of offers because of the work he's done at Crystal Palace. But I think it'll just be a very long second half of the season for Crystal Palace now, they may, because this situation's not a good one. They've worked it out and that he's going to be staying on to the end of the season. But I think he could, if they lose a couple more games, he's going to blow up again. If they don't get players on between now and the end of the window, I think there's every chance he could even walk away. He could just completely just say, you know what, forget about sacking me. I'm tendering my resignation.
Yeah, I think he's done a wonderful job at Crystal Palace. Fantastic, and he will go down there as a legend. But do you think that some clubs that perhaps thought about having him shortlisted for their future manager, do you think that some of them are now thinking twice because of the way that he has conducted himself in the media?
I don't know, because Jose Mourinho's done this, Antonio Conte's done this, and they still get, but they've managed some of the bigger clubs. So I think what he would say if he was getting interviewed for a top job as well, if you back me, I'll not have to make any statements like that. And of course, being at a top club, you would expect to be backed with significant funds. If you're at a Man United, or if you're at a Liverpool or a Chelsea. But the reality is that United now are probably going to go a different way. I don't think he will be there. At the end of the day, Glasner plays that back three, doesn't he? And that United don't want to go down that route again after Ruben Amorim. So I don't think he would be the right fit.
Yeah,
I don't think he would be the right fit for Spurs either. I think Arne Slot on the form that Liverpool's on now, they've kind of stemmed the bleeding. I think he'll probably get, if he gets them into the Champions League again, which I would expect, now based on this turnaround, that he'll probably get another season at Liverpool. Liam Senior, who knows? It's not been the most brilliant start for him. Yes, they've won a couple of games, but they struggled to beat that Paphos in the Champions League. They lost to Arsenal in the League Cup. They just got over the line against Brentford. So, if that doesn't go well, maybe Chelsea could be his best opportunity for a job at the top end of the Premier League. But that's not easy going to Chelsea. I mean, every manager that's managed under that new Todd Bowley ownership has struggled. They get anything, any relationship with the board. So maybe that wouldn't be the right move for him. I think there's every chance he could go back into Europe, Chris, and get a decent job in Europe.
So Crystal Palace, Chelsea, I'm going to go for 1-1. What are you going to go for?
I'm going for a 0-0 draw.
I was going to say we've predicted a number of draws today. This is meant to be, like I said this to you last week. It's meant to be the best league in the world, and we're predicting some of these poor results. But it's the way that Premier League is this season. Okay, we've both gone for a draw. Another game, lunchtime on Sunday. Newcastle take on Aston Villa. Newcastle are 8th, Aston Villa are 3rd. Interesting and awkward interview with Emery last weekend. He said about that he doesn't see Aston Villa as top 5 contenders.
Again, I think this is another situation where we're seeing managers now who don't feel that they're getting the backing that they deserve. I think Oliver Glasner is probably thinking, well, I've won you the FA Cup. You're not going to back me here. You're just going to keep selling our best players. Emery also, I think there's no coincidence that Daniel Mallon left on a loan to Roma, who was still being utilised as a squad player at Aston Villa. They've now lost some players to injury. And Emery says, well, he loses one game, and he comes out and says, well, we can't compete with the top 5. We're not good enough. Almost saying that. And I think that's another message to the board that you've got to do some business between now and the end of the window, or I'm not going to be very happy. But I did say this, Chris, as well on a previous one. I think it was only in the last week or two that I do feel with Aston Villa that Emery is probably taking them as far as he can. I think if I was Man United, Unai Emery would be my top target for a permanent manager role. He's done it in England with Aston Villa. He's done it in Europe multiple times. It didn't work out at Arsenal, but you could argue he didn't get the time or the backing that Arteta did. So, and he's been at Aston Villa for a number of years now. So it's not just, a one-season wonder. He's been there for some years now. I think my 2 top targets, if I was Man United, and I know we'll speak about them shortly, would be Unai Emery and Eddie Howe. I think they're the 2 that I would really go down the route of, just because of what they've done here. With also, the Aston Villa and Newcastle are at that stage that the only real step up is a Man United, is a Liverpool, is a Man City. They're at that. They're on that mix of like Spurs, and Chelsea, you would say. So they're a team you would expect to be in Europe most seasons now. So I think naturally that would be the big step for Emery. And we're hearing that Villa can't do anything because of the financial rules in January. We're hearing that in the summer they may have to sell one of their biggest assets, like Morgan Rogers, just to be able to reinvest. So I think if he gets Villa into the Champions League again and wins the Europa League, they're going to be one of the favourites to go and win that, because they're one of the best teams on it, and with Unai Emery's record on it, for me, they're the clear favourites. If he wins the Europa League, gets them back into the Champions League with a top 4 finish or top 5 finish, I think it'll probably be the end of the road at Aston Villa for him, because I think the only way is down then. I don't see Villa being a title contender or winning a Premier League based on the fact that they can't spend any money, really. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But that was the first shot fired. And if Villa maybe have a poor end of the season, or he doesn't get the backing that he thinks he should get, I could see him at Man United next season. Can you see that? I mean, if I was Man United, I'd be looking at him as a real contender. Yeah,
it's funny actually. I saw some interviews with some of the Manchester United legends, and they didn't seem to mention Emery in the running for that job.
Well, Gary Neville mentioned Carlo Ancelotti, Thomas Tuchel, and Mauricio Pochettino, and the only one I think really fits there is Pochettino. And we know that Spurs and him's got that relationship, and might, if both teams go for him, he may well go with Spurs just because of the connection he has with the Spurs fans. But Thomas Tuchel, for me, is a very short stunt. He's a very similar manager to Conte. He comes on for a season and a half, 2 years max, and then he sets the place on fire before he goes. He falls out with everybody. He fell out of Chelsea. He fell out of PSG. So I don't think long term that's a good move for United. Carlo Ancelotti is in the twilight years of his career. So I think you've got to be going down the route of Unai Emery or Eddie Howe. If Man United are looking for the next Sir Alex Ferguson in a sense where they want somebody in charge for a number of years, I think they're the two that stand out for me.
Yeah, I must say, and you've heard me be very complimentary about Emery. Particularly this season, I think he's a great manager. Both of these teams, though, Gareth, going into this game, Newcastle and Aston Villa, both teams will be disappointed with their recent result, because after beating Spurs 2-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the FA Cup, in the Premier League, they lost 1-0 at home against Everton. And Newcastle, after going out of the League Cup, of course, League Cup holders, lost the game at home against City, and then a 0-0 draw away at Wolves. And Newcastle are unbeaten in their last 17 home league games against Aston Villa, winning 11 and drawing 6, winning the last 4 by an aggregate score of 13-1. I'm going to go for a Newcastle win here, and I'm going to go for a 1-0 Newcastle win. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go for a 2-1 Newcastle one, Chris.
Okay. We've agreed on a lot today, I think. Right. The next one, 4:30 p.m. kickoff on Sunday, is Arsenal against Manchester United. Now, Arsenal currently have a 7-point lead. I'm going to wrap this one up really quickly, because we don't want to be sitting here talking about Arsenal's 7-point lead at the top. But do you think Manchester? Let's turn it, on its head. Do you think Manchester City can challenge Arsenal this season, or do you think it is done?
Well, let's be honest. Arsenal have been fortunate that, and they've 2-0 draws in a row in the league against Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. They've been very fortunate that Man City haven't capitalised on that. So, and a Man City team a few seasons ago would have ate that up, and all of a sudden we're talking about that gap being down at 3 points. So Man City have missed a big opportunity. To answer your question, if they don't beat Wolves, I think that'll probably be it. And if Arsenal get a 1 here, I think that gap's too big. Man City have lost 5 games already. It's rare that a team loses 6-7 games and wins the league. I can't think of that happening too many times. So I think Man City have got to get themselves together very, very quickly. I think Mark Gahey coming on is going to make a massive difference with the injuries they've had at the back. And he's a leader as well. So your only hope is Man City can get some sort of Erling Haaland has got to start scoring goals again as well. If he doesn't, if this run continues, it's going to be very difficult. I don't really see Aston Villa getting involved. So it's if Man City can't reel them in, it's going to be Arsenal's year. But this is a very difficult game. I think that is arguably Man United's best performance at Old Trafford in a long, long time. They didn't play on the counter-attack. They actually went after Man City. They played like a Man United team of old. And I've always said, Michael Carrick, I've been very impressed with him, and I'll be interested to see how he does in this spell at Man United. But what a start that was. And the players were really fired up from. I know Dallow, we could argue, could have been sent off, but there was 3 or 4 tackles in those first 10 minutes that United were really up for it, and they were flying on the tackles. And I haven't seen that from United for a number of years. So I think this is a much more difficult game for Arsenal than it would have been a few weeks ago. And Arsenal aren't scoring a lot of goals from open play at the moment. So, if United can keep them at bay with the set pieces, they've got every chance of getting a result here.
Free Kobbie Mainoo. He was freed under Michael Carrick. Have we lost him?
Kobbie Mainoo, and I'm hearing that they're in talks for a new contract. That was one of the stranger decisions of Amorim's reign, that Kobbie Mainoo was on the bench for most of it. Very strange.
Gareth, what score prediction are you going to go with? Because can Michael Carrick get another 3 points in his second game?
Well, it would be great, wouldn't it, if Carrick was running up the touchline and celebrating with the away fans. I am going to go for, surprisingly, another draw this weekend. I feel it could be a lot of draws this weekend. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I've gone for the same. My God, we're boring this week, aren't we?
Yeah, very.
Right, the last one to talk about, Monday Night Football. Everton are in 10th place at the moment. Leeds are in 16th. Leeds are 8 points away from the relegation zone, so they will be very, very happy right now. Everton are 3 points away from 5th, 3 points away from a Champions League spot. Can they finish in Europe? Can they finish in a European spot this season?
It's a funny one with Everton because they started the season on fire at home, but recently they've been getting better results away from home. The home form has deserted them. So, that was a big result at Aston Villa last week. Can they follow that up? I don't know. I'm hearing Jack Grealish has got a bad injury. He could be out for a bit of time. But Njai will be back from the AFCON, so that's a big boost for Everton because I think when he plays, Everton are a much better team. Look, the way the league is, why, if you were an Everton, a Brighton, a Fulham, a Brentford, a Sunderland, why would you not be dreaming of a European spot? Because there's so many teams that should be up there that ain't up there and are being very inconsistent. So Everton have got a chance, but for me, they need to sign a striker between now and next Monday. They've got to bring a striker and that can score goals.
Calvert-Lewin, how do you think he's going to be feeling going back to Everton? Oh, I think we've lost him again.
Oh, he will be really up for this game. He will want to prove a point to everyone that he was still good enough for Everton. I actually think this will be a really entertaining game because Leeds over the last few weeks have been so entertaining. So I think there'll be goals in this one, Chris, to be honest.
Go on, what's your score prediction? There's obviously a big time delay on this. I'm going to go for a 2-1.
I'm going to go Everton for a 2-2 draw, Chris. Surprisingly, another draw.
Okay. Right. Gareth, I won't wait for you to say goodbye because there is a clear time delay here, about 10 seconds, I reckon. Right. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. Gareth, thank you so much for all of your input, as always. And we will see you very, very soon. Enjoy the weekend and come on, you Spurs.
Thank you.